So I'm just going to start by letting you guys know, for some reason, when I preach here, I'm just unbelievably nervous, even though I know you guys. And so give me like, I think roughly my wife has timed it. It's about 10 minutes that I'll stumble about, I'll be shaking. Then I'll start yelling at you guys, and then I'll try to tone it down and close nicely. So you guys should be. It was interesting that Sandy did her presentation this week. We didn't plan it that way. Like I said, it was, if you believe in coincidences, which I'm sure none of us do. It was just really coincidental that she was going to do her presentation this week. She was supposed to do it last week. Things got changed around. And I'm saying it's interesting because of what I was led to preach on. It's the idea of persecution. Do I have a title thing? No. Pastor Sergey gets a title. All right, just don't look up there because I have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But persecution is this idea, this concept that we hear often. And I'm curious about what our take on it, or what our perspective on it is. It takes a lot of forms. We know that. And I think that for a lot of us, we hear the word persecution and we think it's got to have some great tragedy in there, right? It's got to be this huge, just massive calamity for us to call something persecution. But the term in Scripture that's used for persecution literally means to cause to suffer. Okay, so the difficult thing about that is suffering is a relative concept. What one person goes through and says, I'm suffering from, and another person goes through and says that they're suffering, could look like two dramatically different things, but to each person, they're significant. So I think that that's one aspect that we need to consider when we think of the term suffering. For example, I'm going to throw out a couple examples. Having 7 children. Anyone think that's suffering? It's suffering. It's brutal suffering. If you don't know, come speak with me or Denise afterwards and we can tell you about the constant persecution that we're under as parents of 7 kids. How about the Marchentos? Do we think of them as suffering? We know that they have 4 daughters, right? 4 wonderful, beautiful daughters. Their 3rd daughter, Polly, was born with Down syndrome. Pastor Sergey and I have had this discussion often where he'll look at me and go, I don't know how you guys do it. 7 kids? That's just crazy. I look at him and I go, that's nothing compared to what you have to go through. So what does he do? He goes and adopts a 2nd daughter that has Down syndrome. Is that suffering? Now, you can talk to them about it and ask them how they get on through their day, and I'm sure that they're going to tell you, yeah, for the most part, we get through. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's an overwhelming, full-time, constant commitment. I look at their situation, I go, that's suffering. Now, Pastor Sergey looks at me and goes, 7 kids? That's suffering. You see what I'm saying, how it's relative? Our perspectives seem to determine what suffering is and what isn't. I've got a very good friend. His name is Scott, and he is a counselor at Harvest Bible Church in Rolling Meadows. His job is to counsel people who suffer. That's what he does. So you would think someone that counsels people, how difficult must his life be? If he's, in a sense, I don't want to say that he's got the answers, but he knows the steps to take to get people through difficult times. Well, he has an adult son who suffers from schizophrenia. He lives in a home for other people who suffer with similar mental conditions. And with the use of medication, Donnie, his son, is able to regulate aspects of his life. Scott, his heart breaks every time that he goes and meets with him, every time that he goes and visits with him. Because every time he goes to see him, he shares the gospel with his son. And his son's response is, I just don't get it. I don't understand. But he says then, but I know I'm going to heaven. Because that's what happens to people when they die. Now I know this friend Scott, he loves Christ like most of us do, or have the desire to. He really truly has Christ first in his life. Imagine sharing the gospel with one of your kids who's an adult, who tells you, I don't understand it. Now this is a guy, like I said, he counsels for a living. He gives comfort and brings comfort to people. Imagine knowing every single day that no matter how many times you share the gospel with your son's response is going to be, I don't get it. Now I don't know what God has in store for them. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that's just yet another example of suffering. I look at that and I go, I don't know if I can do that every day. I don't know if every time I saw my adult 24-year-old son, if I could share the gospel knowing that the answer is going to be the exact same answer every time, that I just don't get it. He looks at me and goes, Hugh, how do you get through the day with 7 kids? I could never go through that. Ironic, isn't it? That we both look at each other's position and go, not for all the money in the world would I trade with you. Suffering also takes different forms. For some, it's the loss of a job. For some, it's news that I've got cancer. For some, it's this cancer is fatal. Or it's HIV. Or let's not even go to that extreme. Let's just talk about the basic everyday things. For some, it's my marriage is really weak, it's struggling. Or my kid, no matter what I do, is rebellious and I'm constantly punishing him. And I think what's interesting is oftentimes when we're sharing that with people, when we're telling people this is what's going on in my life, there's almost always that guaranteed Christian response that we're going to hear. Hold on. God gives you exactly what you can handle. Has anyone ever said that or used that phrase? Come on, be honest. Where do we get that from? Does anyone know any verse in the Bible that says that? I'm just asking. Specific verse that says that? Or the idea behind it? Because I knew that someone was going to, and I had a feeling it was going to be vague. He was going to challenge that. But before you give me the verse, that is a quote from Mother Teresa. That phrase has been made famous by Mother Teresa.
1 Corinthians 10:13.
Okay, what's the verse? Any temptation? Is that suffering? Is that God saying that I'm going to give you only what you can handle? Here's why I really specifically want to challenge everyone with this. If God gives me what I can handle, do I need Him? If God gives me just enough to get by, do I need Him? Because if the struggles that I have in raising 7 kids, God says, this is the amount you need, here you go. What am I going to do? Chances are I'm going to start relying on me. I'm going to turn away from that, and I'm going to start relying on me. I'm going to say, I got through this. I was able to do this. But here's where I want you guys to rethink this idea. I don't think that God gives us what we can handle. I think He gives us more than what we can handle. The reason we have a person to turn back to. If God gives me just what I need, I'm going to coast through life no problems. If He gives me more, I have to look to Him because I can't do it on my own. I can't get through it. I have to go back to God and ask Him for more grace. I have to go back to God and rely on His strength. I have to go back to God and look to Him instead of looking to myself. Because I'm out of options. I can't do it alone. Now, I don't know if you guys thought, but there was one word I kept saying throughout that whole time. I. Right? It was all about me, what I can do, what I can't do, what I can't do. And what God is doing is saying, it's not about you. Regardless of the situation you're in, regardless of the persecution you're in, regardless of the suffering you go through, turn to me and I'll get you through it. It's not on you. Cry out to me. Look toward me. And that's where I just really want to challenge everyone to think about, like I said, that phrase, that idea that we have, that We'll only get what we can handle. Because I can assure you that there are days that the Marchenkos go, I cannot handle this. I can assure you that there are days that my friend Scott goes, I cannot handle this. I think it's more than they can handle. It's more than Scott can handle. It's more than I can handle. That way God goes, are you ready to turn back to me? Are you ready to come back to me and look to me to get you through this difficult time? Are you ready to look to me so that I can carry you through this? You know, most of us, and I think I should change that to all of us, suffer. And the problem is in, like I said, it's the relativeness of how it plays out. And the difficulty is when we start comparing our sufferings with someone else's suffering. I say, you know what, my life isn't that bad. It's not that hard. Because I look at what this person does. Their life isn't that bad. Look at what that person does. Look what that person goes through. You know what that is? That's a false sense of humility. You're saying that things aren't so bad for me. And you know what? For you, they are. Because you're the only barometer of what bad, difficult suffering is. If I compare myself to this person, of course it's never going to be difficult. My life isn't going to seem like a challenge. My life isn't going to seem like it's hard to get through this. Because I'm basing my life on what the Marchenkos go through. I'm basing my life on what Scott goes through. I'm basing my life on what this person goes through. I'm basing my life on those kids that we saw in the video. And that's me putting on this sense of false humility, which is just as bad as a sin of pride. We have to know that we are suffering for a purpose. And ultimately that's to bring God glory. That's to honor God. And God's using that suffering to make us more like His Son, which is what we all want anyways, or that's what we should want. Now, I told you guys that suffering is like a relative idea, a relative concept. For certain people it's this, for certain people it's this. We can't get into the habit of falling into, well, my life is okay because of this. But I want to just talk about suffering in terms of persecution. I did a lot of research looking up where the church suffers and how that's affected the church. In 1900, they estimate that in China there were 3 million believers. Today's estimates, 100 million. In Western Africa, places like Nigeria and the Sudan, incredible growth rate of Christianity. Brazil, there are reports of over 100 million believers. In Vietnam, the U.S. Department of State estimates that Christianity has grown 600% in the last decade. In Nigeria, the Christian rate was roughly 22% in 1953, and in 2003, it's 48%. In South Africa, in 1951, it was 0.2%. They say that the numbers in 2001 were 7.6%. In South Korea, Christianity has grown from about 21% in 1985 to 30% in 2002. And what's the common denominator in all those countries? Persecution, suffering, right? All those countries, they're either communist or formerly communist countries, they're heavily socialist countries, or they're notoriously known for just oppressing and dominating Christian faith. They're opposing faiths that dominate Christian faith. Mari, no? What's the rate in Indonesia, roughly?
Less than 5%.
Less than 5% in Indonesia. And what's the Muslim population there? Not over 90%. And they're making progress. They're from Indonesia, or at least Mari's are. But Mari's parents are missionaries in Indonesia, and they see some growth, minimal growth, or I don't even put you on the spot, but you heard. Yeah. And what about the church overall there? What's going on?